Hey everybody, Mr. Wallowitz here. I just want to introduce our next unit of study, which will be involving American imperialism, expanding our global presence. So here, these notes are entitled The American Empire. A few vocabulary terms for you to know for a test at the end of this unit. We have isolationism, a policy of remaining apart from the country's affairs or interests of other groups, especially the political affairs of other countries. Collective security, the cooperation of several countries in an alliance to strengthen the security of each. Imperialism, a policy of extending a country's power and influence through diplomacy or military force. Internationalism, a political principle that advocates greater political or economic cooperation among nations and people. Again, these may not necessarily come up again through this Google Slides presentation. However, they will be terms that you will have to know for a test at the end of this unit. So we have patterns of American interventions. We start in China, start in the Pacific here. The United States had been trading with China since 1784. This is even before the United States Constitution was ratified. And over 100 years later, in 1899, President William McKinley's Secretary of State, John Hay, announced his open door policy. Now, what it called for was that Western powers should have equal access to Chinese markets. The United States wasn't the only country trading with China at the time. There were several European countries and Asian countries as well trading with China. Now, what John Hay and the McKinley administration wanted was that no one country should control who gets what from China. It was everybody should have equal access. Many of the European countries ignored it. They talked it down, but never went against it. No one country controlled China's export operation. And about a year later, in 1900, President McKinley sent troops to China to aid in putting down the Boxer Rebellion. Now, the Boxer Rebellion is a movement that was opposed to foreign businesses and missionaries operating in China. This rebellion wanted to expel most foreign influence from China so that China could still remain independent, and as well as have an equal participation in the global economy. The United States saw this as a threat in that it would cost more for us to do business with a China-first economy. So President McKinley is going to send troops to China to make sure that this rebellion is put down. And in doing so, McKinley is the first president to do this, to send troops to a foreign country without congressional consent, and thus established a precedent for presidents to order U.S. troops to action around the world. So McKinley is the first, and it's still happening today, even with President Donald Trump, President Barack Obama, President George W. Bush, President Bill Clinton, President George H.W. Bush, so on and so forth. Every single president after McKinley, starting with McKinley, sends U.S. troops in military intervention without the consent of Congress. At the same time here, or even before the open door policy, missionaries in Hawaii obtained large tracts of land and started a lucrative sugar plantation. As a result of this, many American business interests turned their attention to Hawaii and their sugar plantations. They are trying to get in on this action here of making wealth from Hawaii's sugar plantations. So throughout the 1800s, Hawaii is going to be controlled by 5 major sugar companies. They will have a say in Hawaii's political policy and its financial policy. Anything that would go against the business interests of America would be lobbied against in Hawaii so that these 5 American sugar companies could make as much money as possible off of the labor of the local or native Hawaiians. So while the United States is starting to have a major presence in the Pacific Ocean, and we are going to see this again in our next topic here, but the United States is also going to start looking to tighten control over Latin America here in the Western Hemisphere. Now, the Monroe Doctrine. Now, going back to what was hopefully learned in US 1, in the 1820s, European powers finally defeated Napoleon, and Spain and Portugal wanted to reclaim their colonies in Latin America. In 1823, President Monroe, in a speech to Congress, warns these outside powers not to interfere in the Western Hemisphere. His speech warned European powers not to interfere in the Caribbean and Central and South America. He warned these European countries to try not to make new colonies or to overthrow newly independent republics. So the Monroe Doctrine is going to try its best to outcast or expel European influence from the Western Hemisphere. It has this sphere of influence that the United States should have some sort of say in what their neighboring countries can or cannot do. So any country that was lost but not independent from Spain or Portugal or other European countries could not be reclaimed. And any former colonies that did gain its independence from any of those European countries could not be overthrown and reclaimed as a colony. Monroe warns that the United States would consider this dangerous to our peace and safety. And if European countries did try to interfere with existing colonies or try to overthrow independent colonies or independent countries at this point, that the United States would act militarily. In our next lessons, we are going to see that in action when Spain and the United States go to war. Speak softly and carry a big stick. Theodore Roosevelt played a huge role in American imperialism. He emphasized, while he was Assistant Secretary to the Navy under President McKinley, he emphasized the expanding of the Navy and targeting Latin America for a strategic foreign policy. He believes that if the United States is going to have a presence around the world, especially in the Pacific or even here at home in the Caribbean, that the United States Navy needs to be expanded. He believes in the use of force to exert imperialism. Roosevelt exerted control over newly independent Cuba, Puerto Rico, and helped Panama gain independence from Colombia to acquire the U.S. Canal Zone. It was one of Roosevelt's biggest ambitions as president, was to build this canal through Panama, the Panama Canal. And without Panamanian independence, that could not happen. So he is going to allow troops to help Panama put down Colombia, overthrow Colombia, gain its independence. Because the United States was going to help Panama, the United States could influence Panama to get this U.S. Canal Zone. President Roosevelt, as well as his successors, William Howard Taft and Woodrow Wilson, also initiated dollar diplomacy as a way to control Latin American countries without the need for military occupation. The United States worked with banks to loan money to Latin American countries so that the United States could control their financial affairs. If the United States was involved in loaning money, then they could have a greater say over Latin American countries and what they could or could not do. If countries could not repay their loans, then the United States would step in and use whatever force was necessary to take full control over economic and political operations. Roosevelt believed in the idea that the United States should always try to find diplomatic solutions, whether it be dollar diplomacy or through negotiation, but to also be prepared when diplomacy breaks. And especially under dollar diplomacy, if countries that were loaned money by the United States couldn't repay, well, then that gave the United States the incentive to then use its military force to demand payment or to put American business interests first through political action. Finally, the Roosevelt Corollary. Roosevelt Corollary to the Monroe Doctrine, this is like an amendment to the Monroe Doctrine, asserted that the United States wished to promote stable, prosperous states in Latin America that could live up to their political and financial obligations. The Monroe Doctrine declared what Europeans could not do in the Western Hemisphere. And the Roosevelt Corollary inverted this to mean what, quote unquote, some civilized nations in the West could do. He means here that the Monroe Doctrine, while it lays out what European countries could not do, the Roosevelt Corollary is going to map out exactly what the United States could do. And if, like we said, Caribbean or Latin American countries could not pay back their loans, then the United States was then obligated to act in a way to get that repayment by any means necessary. All right, thank you for watching, and you guys have a great day. Make sure we study up for everything. Bye.